Hi, I'm Nick Gillespie with ReasonTV. It is June 28th, Thursday, June 28th. Obamacare decision has just come down. It's been upheld by the Supreme Court. We're talking with Peter Suderman. Peter, is this a win for the Obama administration?
Yes, this is a win for the Obama administration and a loss for those of us who oppose Obamacare. However, the form of the decision that came down was really unexpected and kind of weird, and there were some silver linings in it.
Okay, so how is this I mean, you've talked about it as a bizarro decision. Nobody quite saw this outcome coming. We knew the case, the law was either going to be upheld or down. How is it a bizarre decision?
Well, the decision that came down was kind of the opposite of what everyone expected for a couple of reasons. For one thing, the mandate was upheld as constitutional, but not under the Commerce Clause, which was the primary argument for the constitutionality of the individual mandate. Instead,
and that is that Congress has the right to regulate interstate commerce, and this falls under that, even if it's forcing somebody to do something they wouldn't be doing otherwise.
Right, exactly. And so instead, the court ruled that the mandate was constitutional under the Congress's taxing power, which is an odd ruling because even a lot of liberal justices have previously said that argument just doesn't fly. But that's the ruling that Justice John Roberts decided to go with.
And clearly, most of the proponents of the law steered clear of the taxing argument. I mean, they were leaning on the Commerce Clause ruling.
Right. In particular, President Obama has insisted on the record that the mandate is not a tax.
Right.
And Democrats in Congress changed the language of the bill during the bill writing process so that it would not say that the mandate was a tax.
Now, so what about the silver linings?
So there are two big silver linings. The first is that the majority opinion written by Chief Justice Roberts does accept that this is not justifiable under the Commerce Clause and accepts the activity-inactivity distinction that opponents of the law have made for so long. The other part, and this
so that's good because it says, I mean, even as it massively expands Congress or the federal government's power over our lives, the Supreme Court is at least saying, hey, the government doesn't have absolute control.
Right. They're saying that there are limits to the Congress's power under the Commerce Clause to regulate. There are limits to Congress's ability to regulate commerce, and that this is beyond those limits. The other silver lining is that the Medicaid expansion, while not ruled unconstitutional, the court ruled that states can opt out of the Medicaid expansion without risking the loss of existing federal Medicaid funds. Now, this is a little bit of a complicated issue, but basically, the law had said that states that continue to participate in Medicaid have to expand Medicaid as the law calls for. Otherwise, they will get zero federal Medicaid funds. And what this says is that that's not the case.
So in that small sense, the states, I mean, the Supreme Court actually recognizes that the states have an independent standing from the federal government.
Yes, that's correct. And that the Medicaid expansion, the way it was structured, the financing of it, the requirement that you buy in totally or not at all was coercive, even though Medicaid is technically a voluntary program.
A lot of the, the chattering beforehand all focused on whether or not Justice Kennedy was going to go limp in the clinches. It turns out to be John Roberts. Did anybody see that coming?
If you look at what Roberts said when he was confirmed, that he wanted to be an umpire, that he wanted to be as neutral as possible, and sort of his long history of insisting on extremely narrow rulings, this does fit with that to some extent. But no, really, most people were not expecting Roberts to side with the liberal majority, and especially if Kennedy sided with the conservatives.
Right. Now, two final questions. One is, what are the prospects for repeal or a massive retrenchment against this law? How can that play out?
The answer is that we won't really know until after the election in November. It depends on whether Mitt Romney beats Obama for the presidency. It depends on whether Republicans take back the Senate. If we have Republicans in control in the House, the Senate, and the presidency, I would say that there's pretty good chances that the law will at least be substantially changed, if not repealed.
Although
otherwise,
it's also true. I mean, you've written about how the Republicans have also started to find parts of Obamacare that we're okay with some of this. this stuff. Can you talk about that?
Right. Republicans are going to have a tough time, it looks like, really committing to full repeal. And a number of them have said, look, we want to keep the good parts of Obamacare. We want to keep some of the insurance expansion provisions, perhaps some of the pre-existing condition regulations on insurers. And so there's going to be a debate in the party over the next couple of weeks, over the next couple of days between now and the election. But really, we're not going to see any actual legislative movement until after November. Between now and then, it's going to be a big political battle. And the biggest part of that is going to be that Republicans are going to take this decision and say, look, Obama, you said this was not a tax hike. You promised not to raise taxes on middle income earners. And the Supreme Court has said that this is only justifiable as a tax. You're a tax hiker.
A final question now. The justifications for healthcare reform were at least twofold. I mean, there were more, but one was that it was going to help reduce healthcare costs going forward. Is there any chance that this bill or that this legislation, in whatever form it ends up implementing, is actually going to cut costs? And the second is, it was supposed to expand coverage to a lot of people, 40 million, 50 million. You hear different numbers of who are uninsured. This is going to increase the insured rolls by 30 million, 32 million. Will it actually help the people who are now getting coverage? Will it help them be healthier and live happier and better lives?
It may be that enough states opt out of the Medicaid expansion that the numbers are significantly lower than we expected.
But will that coverage necessarily, does that mean much for the uninsured?
It's really tough to say. The jury is still out on the health value of being covered by health insurance. We've seen in health insurance experiments that people say they feel better, but we haven't seen a lot of objective health measures by which they actually are better. And so, like I said, the jury's still out. On the cost issue, look, CBO says that this law is going to cost $1 trillion in new spending. Is it going to bring down the cost of insurance? Well, it's going to subsidize the cost of private insurance. But as we know from the long history of health subsidies and other subsidies, when you subsidize something, what happens is that the market raises the price to account for those subsidies. And so I think it's at least very unlikely that ultimately this law helps contain the cost of insurance premiums, helps slow the growth of medical spending overall.
Thank you. Peter Suderman of Reason Magazine, big cover of healthcare. For Reason TV, I'm Nick Gillespie.